I have been making videos about synths here on YouTube for 10 years now. So here are 10 years worth of synth tips boiled down to 10 minutes. And at the end of the video, I'll even explain FM synthesis so that everyone can finally become an FM synth master. Now, after 10 years on YouTube, I want to answer the most frequently asked question here on my channel. Where did you get those colored knobs for the Minilogue and the Minilogue XD? So here is the answer, and it's not sponsored. It's from DJ Tech Tools. I think they're called chroma caps. They sell sets for the Minilogue and the Minilogue XD. The biggest mistake that I see people make when comparing synthesizers that they want to buy is that they are comparing synths that aren't even in the same category. So comparing a big one-voice analog synth to, say, a versatile polyphonic digital synth is a little bit like comparing a sports car to a family minibus. You might want both, but for very different reasons. And to compare synthesizers more easily, I use 4 categories: workstation, generalist, specialist, and unique. A Roland Phantom, for example, is a workstation. It can do a bit of everything, but isn't the best at any one thing. The Minilogue XD or the Cobalt 8 would be generalists. They are often polysynths that can do a wide range of synth sounds, but usually not realistic sounds. And then we have specialists. Synths like the Bass Station and the Korg Monologue. What makes them specialists is that they're focused on specific types of sounds and use cases. And lastly, we have the unique synth category, like for example the Moog Subharmonicon, the Pulsar 23 or Solar 42. These are synths that aren't for everyone. They offer what I'd call a non-standard workflow, and you have to accept them for what they are with the quirks and everything, but they also bring something unique to the table. Analog synths do sometimes sound better than digital synths. You can fight me in the comments about this one. Most analog synths have a very distinct and interesting tone to them, whereas digital synths can range from having a lot of character to sounding quite bland. And that is not to say that digital synths aren't as good. They make up for it by being almost always more versatile than their analog counterparts, with more voices, more effects, and so on. Now, whether or not you can hear that difference in a mix, now that is a very different story. Do not buy several synths with built-in sequencers with the intent of making a full song. I do get questions about this quite frequently. Instead, what you want to do is you want to buy a standalone sequencer, aim for at least 8 tracks on the sequencer, because the built-in sequencers on something like, say, the Minilogue XD just aren't good enough for making full songs. They're too basic, and having multiple synths with built-in sequencers, it just won't make sense. It won't play nicely together. You might not know this, but analog synths with multiple voices will actually have multiple filter circuits, one per voice, and the same with any other analog component that is per voice. So for example, if it has analog VCAs, then there's 4 analog VCAs on a 4-voice synthesizer. And this is why analog gets expensive compared to digital, because with each voice you add, you need actual physical components, circuitry, unlike with digital synths that only require more powerful processors with each voice you add. You need to learn how to use a patchbay, because patchbays lets you change the routing of sound in your studio and can save you from having to reconnect everything once you want to change the flow of the sound in your setup. A patchbay works like this. Output from gear is inserted on the back top row of the patchbay, and input to audio recording equipment or mixers is inserted on the bottom row. This means that if the patchbay is normaled, which most patchbays have an option for, the sound flows from the top to the corresponding audio inputs on the bottom without any connection on the front. And if you want to break this flow, you can insert a patch cable at the front of the unit and then route the audio somewhere else, maybe to some other effects, and then back into the bottom row to be recorded or mixed. And if you need a new patchbay, you should check out thru. It's a synth store focusing on gear from small manufacturers like the Minibay, which is a fantastic patchbay. And they also have a lot of other cool synths that you might not have heard of. So go and check out the channel sponsor thru, linked in the description. Do not start with Modular too early, and don't think it will solve something in your creative life. Modular is for people who want to explore sound, synthesis, or just make their own custom instrument. It's not, however, some highway to fame, fortune, or getting stuff done. It's complicated, it's time-consuming, but it's also a whole lot of fun. When you're buying a new synthesizer, workflow, the way a synth is actually designed and how you interact with it, is just as important as the sound. How a synth feels to use and how you gel with its workflow is directly tied to how much use you will get out of it. A great sounding synth with a terrible design will not stay in your studio for long. The amount of gear you have and the complexity of said gear must be in proportion to your knowledge and skill level. If your setup is too complex for you to handle, you will get stressed and spend a lot of time just troubleshooting. Make sure to keep your setup simple. A percentage of people who get into synths for the wrong reason. If you want to produce music or write songs, a DAW and an audio interface, a MIDI keyboard and headphones or speakers are simply a much better choice than, say, a DAWless synth setup. On the other hand, if you want to jam, be in the moment, just have fun, explore sound, make some music, then I think that synth setups are perfect as a starting point, but make sure you know what it is you want to achieve before buying stuff. Remember that other synth nerds and music producers are not your audience. They are your peers, your colleagues. So don't expect people in synth forums, for example, to care about your music. It's not because people don't care about music, and it's not because people only care about gear. People care deeply about music, but it's simply the wrong place to go fishing for an audience. MIDI thru boxes are a must for pretty much any synth setup, and that is because it can take one MIDI output from, say, a sequencer and then split that into multiple MIDI outputs and send MIDI data, sequencer data, to up to, say, 16 instruments, because one MIDI port handles up to 16 channels of MIDI. Just because you make electronic music doesn't mean you have to release music and try and become a successful artist. No one expects someone who owns a guitar to write great music. Just simply sitting down and making music for yourself can be its own reward. And I personally don't think that music becomes more or less art because you've uploaded it to Spotify. Lastly, in today's video, let me try and explain FM synthesis. So first and foremost, operators are either making a sound or modulating another operator. If it's making a sound, we call it a carrier. If it's modulating something, we call it modulator. Now, algorithms tend to confuse people, and you should think about them as the signal flow of the FM sound. So the bottom row of operators are usually the ones that you can hear, so it's the operators that are carriers. And then everything above that are modulators. They are there to modulate whatever they are connected to. So here we're listening to one carrier. Now let's add in operator 2, which is, according to the algorithm, a modulator. If you increase the level of operator 3, according to the algorithm, what do you think will happen? Well, it should introduce a sound, because it is at the bottom row. And operator number 4, being above 3, modulates it. Let's add the 4 operators together. When we use a modulator to modulate a carrier, the frequency ratios, so basically the difference in tuning, will determine how harmonic, musical, or dissonant the result is. And then you have envelopes and LFOs to change the way in which the modulators behave. For example, one operator and one modulator. Here I've set up an LFO that goes to the level of operator 2, the modulator. And that will mean that the change is rhythmic. And we can add a super snappy envelope to the coarse ratio. And if your FM patch sounds too chaotic, then simply try and dial back the modulation a bit. Because unlike on a traditional analog synth where you remove frequencies, we kind of sculpt the sound by removing things, we are actually adding things to the sound. We're adding more harmonics to the sound with FM synthesis. And you need to make sure that modulations aren't on full blast all the time, that they're coming in and out of the sound in a kind of musical way. That was FM synthesis, and these were 10 years worth of synth tips boiled down in under 10 minutes or so, I hope. And I want to thank you all for the support over these 10 years, and I hope to see you in the next video. Okay, that was, yeah, I don't know if I made it in 10 minutes, but yeah, we'll see.